Hello! It is time for Art in the AM, and I am a couple of minutes late because I had cleaned up my studio, cleaned up my table over the weekend, and I couldn't find my book that I have been doing the Art in the AM for the ABCs of Art in. So we are going through round 2 of the ABCs of Art. So each week I just pick a word that has to do with the letter, that has to do with art, and we just talk about it a little bit. And sometimes I do some art, and sometimes I have a completely blank page because I didn't do anything on it from the week before. Last week was ephemera, and I talked a lot about different types and how to store it, and I gave some tips and things like that. So I actually didn't do anything in my journal. This week, I chose a word that, to be perfectly honest, I have never tried this technique before. I don't even know exactly if it's going to work given the materials that I have here. And we're just going to see in my journal what it's like and what it does. And it's something that I want to try out. So if you are new here, this is Art in the AM that I do every Monday morning, that I've been doing for the past 6 years at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So you always show up, and half an hour, 35 minutes or so, we talk, we do a little bit of art, and we go through the ABCs, and we're in the second round. And my name is Jamie. I am the artist here at Creations of Studio 39. And today, for the letter F, that is what letter we're up to for the second round, I'm going to be talking to you about fresco. And I don't know that I really ever knew that word very much, but I did know the most famous fresco, the one that you're probably all familiar with, and probably didn't even know exactly, you just knew that it was a painting. And it is the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo. It is located in Italy, which is where the word fresco, I think that parts of fresco, like different types of fresco, definitely come from Italian words. I don't know about the actual word fresco. I didn't look up like what do they call it, the etymology of that word. But so we're going to be talking about fresco, and I'm going to try to replicate. I'm going to say replicate because I'm not trying to duplicate, because I'm not using the same materials. So a fresco is, I'm going to look at my definition that I wrote down to make sure that I can tell you correctly. It's a mural technique. So that's the first thing. So murals, you think of being on walls, and they're large, and they have like multiple different parts and, things in them. So that's what I think about a mural. Usually they're large on the side of a building is kind of what I think of now, because that's where I usually see murals. But it is a mural technique that uses water-based pigments, I guess is the right word, on wet lime plaster. And that is the part that I don't think that I knew. I knew the Sistine Chapel was a painting, but I don't know that I really understood the process. And that's what I'm going to try to show to you today, using materials that are maybe as close as I can get them to what Michelangelo might have used. And we're just going to see how it works. So the first thing that I was going to see if there's a picture. So I actually got to go see the Sistine Chapel in 2004. It was part of my master's program, and I got to travel and earn master's credit, so that was pretty awesome. And I got to go on a trip with 17 other people and my professor and I think that she was affiliated with the college that I was going through, and she also lived in Rome. I don't remember how that connection happened. And she went with us too. So we had someone who spoke Italian that was there with us and got us, onto the gondolas and like all, you know, found the internet cafes and all these kinds of things because she could speak Italian and we could not. So it was an amazing experience, and getting to see the Sistine Chapel was very surreal. Actually, all of it, seeing things that I talked about in my classes, it was all very surreal. But I did pick up a lot of souvenirs, and one of them happened to be a Michelangelo book. So I was going to look through and see if I could find a picture of the Sistine Chapel, which it definitely has images of that in here. But I was looking for probably the most famous part of the Sistine Chapel, which is the creation of David. That's one scene of the mural, and that is where the two fingers are coming together. So you're probably familiar with that. So that's what I was trying to see, if there was an image of that in here. And this is kind of a fun book because it talks about from the viewpoint of someone who worked for Michelangelo. It doesn't actually have a close-up. It has like an image of the Sistine Chapel and coming through, but it doesn't have the close-up of that. So that was what I was looking through here to see. So I don't see, because that's what I was going to try to paint was, oh, and here is a whole thing on the back here about Fresco. It talks about Michelangelo was only 13 years old when he learned the technique of painting a fresco, which is a way to paint large surfaces like the walls of a church or a building. The name itself is fresco for fresh. So there you go. It is an Italian word. I didn't even look that up. It does make sense. The plaster is fresh. It's wet when they're painting on there. And it talks about use watercolor. So I'm gonna tell you like what I'm gonna use today to try this. Let me see if this folds out. Well, I'll tell you what. There is that little picture right there of the Sistine Chapel, that creation of Adam part. So I think I'm gonna look at that, and that's what I'm going to paint. So here is what I'm going to use. First, I want to tell you how the mural itself, I think that there was a word for this too, the skeleton, I think that they called it, the ghost print or something or other. It's the image that they were tracing on to the wall for the fresco, right? So if you've ever traced anything, you're probably familiar with coloring on the back with the graphite pencil and then laying it down and then tracing over it. And I would imagine that maybe was pretty difficult on a wall, definitely on a ceiling. So they came up with a different way, maybe because there wasn't graphite at the time, maybe, I don't know. This was like in the 1500s, right, when Michelangelo was doing it. So he had the images that he wanted to get onto the ceiling. And the process that they used was to put that image on there and poke holes along the lines. And then they took charcoal. I mean, think about how messy this would be. And then they dusted it so that the charcoal went through those holes. And then that's what they followed. It sounds very messy to me. Like the idea of using graphite paper sounds much, much better now. But that was the process that they used to poke those holes and use the charcoal. I'm not going to be doing that today. I'm just going to be kind of like playing around. But I am going to use, similar to the type of pigments, by using chalk pastels. So I was looking to see which different ones I have in here. I have just these chalk pastels, and I'm just going to pick out some different colors. They're actually pretty bright, vivid colors in there. I'm going to pick out a couple. I think I'll do a flesh color, I think I will do kind of a light blue color. It's kind of like a light blue. And then I'm going to do kind of a ochre kind of a color. So I'm just going to do those 3 colors. And in place of the plaster, I thought about using gesso, and I don't have any of that over here, so I'm not going to use gesso. I actually found something similar to plaster, and I have these tubs, and it is actually powdered grout. It looks a lot like plaster. So this is what we're going to try. I'm going to mix up some of that grout with some water, and I'm going to spread it onto my paper. But first, I'm going to get some of these pigments ready with some water. So I save like these little lids. So I'm going to save some, or use some lids, and I'm going to essentially mix up some colors from those 3, from those 3 colors. I'm going to like take the pigment, the chalk part, and then I'm going to add some water to it. You could use watercolors, and you could try putting watercolors over the gesso, and that would kind of, imitate the idea of creating a fresco. And then what happens is when the watercolors dry and the gesso would dry, they bind together, and it's as if the painting becomes part of the wall. And that's different than when you think about acrylic paint sitting on top of a canvas. This is all like part of the wall. And I don't know that I really kind of understood the process enough to really know that that's what was going on. So I have a couple little trays, and I have, do that one for the blue, and I have the plaster. So let me see how these, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera down so you can kind of see, because I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to be like creating all of this, but here are my little trays. This is the one that I'm going to put the plaster in, but that's going to be last. I'm going to put the colors in these. So this is pretty soft chalk. So I am just coloring it on, and that's why I wanted to kind of put it in this little lid kind of here. So I'm getting dust, right? I'm getting the pigment, and these are artist chalks, I guess, but oh, I swear I did not move that, and it just like fell over. I guess because I was creating movement with my chalk here. I'll be a little more careful. But you could use just like regular like sidewalk chalk, and you could try that. So I have no idea how much I will need, but I have a little bit of dust there. And then I'm going to do the brown one. Some of them are softer than others. Like this one really created dust pretty quickly. I don't know that I would be able to do this on paper because the pigment would go into the paper. You'd have to have some kind of non-absorbent surface to create the paints. So that looks like that has enough there. And then I already have some blue on here, but I'm going to see how much dust I can just kind of create by just going back and forth in the same spot here. That actually created quite a bit of just kind of going back and forth. So then I have a little spray bottle. I doubt that Michelangelo had a spray bottle. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water. And have a brush. Let's start with the lightest one and see. So it takes a little bit to kind of mix all of that powder into there. I am pretty sensitive to dust, so I'm already kind of noticing I would not be able to do this. If there was a lot of dust, you know, and just the plaster and mixing that, I would probably have to wear like a mask, because that made like a nice kind of fleshy kind of color there. And then I'll do this one. That actually made a pretty nice color there. So there you go. If you have some chalk pastels, you can make some watercolors. And then I have the blue one here. And I'm going to try not to get it into that paint. I don't think that that paint would pick up at all, because I think that it's acrylic paint, but I'm just going to kind of keep it contained over here. So that's making like a nice kind of sky blue color. So imagine if you're working with wet plaster and wet paint like this, I would think that you would have to work kind of quickly before it dries, right? Before the water evaporates. So I think about, you know, just all the different conditions that Michelangelo would have had to work with. So I am realizing I don't have anything to scoop up here, this grout with. So I'm taking a little, I'm gonna make sure I put the lid on there. Yeah, so even just that little bit of dust, I kind of notice. I'm gonna use my spray bottle again. Probably need a little bit more in that than, and I don't know how long I have for, I'm gonna use this, I think, to mix up, to work with this. So we'll see before it starts to, you know, like harden up. I would imagine I have a little bit of time. So I have my plaster, you know, which is the grout, and then I have my pigments. So I'm going to lay this on my paper here, make sure I have in the right way here. So you might not be able to see this. Oh, there's definitely texture in here because of the grout. So I'm not going to paint the whole page. I'm just going to kind of fill up, you know, whatever this uses here. And I can see where this could potentially dry pretty quick. So if Michelangelo was working with wet plaster, I wonder how long he actually had to work on it before he had to like put the wet plaster. I don't know how long that takes to dry. So this is still going to be pretty wet. It's already kind of setting up in some spots, so I'm going to wash out my brush really well. And I'm going to start kind of with the lighter, and I'm just kind of making like these, you know, kind of arm like shapes coming into the center. We'll see if that's how it actually turns out there. They're kind of coming into the center. And remember, I'm kind of painting this upside down too. You probably noticed. So I'm kind of looking at the picture over here, and then I'm painting upside down. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of the blue around. Oh, I kind of like that texture in there. It's moving around the grout a little bit, which is an interesting, you know, I kind of like the texture, but I'm not sure how I would control. Oh, and then that made like a darker little area in there. So when I had read about the frescoes, I read about they actually, when they dry, they stay pretty vibrant because they're a part of the plaster. I probably didn't mix up enough of the blue. I cannot imagine getting details with like at all with this. I don't even know how that would work. So I'm going to turn this around. So you're going to see it upside down, but I'm going to come in with this darker color and see if I can't start to get a little bit of the look of the hands. Yeah, I don't even know how you would be able to get a texture or like a detail out of that at all. So I realize it's too dark right there, so I'm wondering if I can kind of come back in. I can a little bit. And lighten that back up. Such an interesting process, working in it when it's still like really wet. You know, it's very similar to how watercolors, you just have to, you know, just kind of let them do their thing. This is a little bit different because you have a little bit more control, but I'm still kind of just, you know, wherever those colors kind of go. The plaster is maybe making it a little bit easier to control, but not really that much. So I have no idea. Maybe after it dried a little bit, he came back in and did some of the details, because I'm not able to really get details at all in there. So we'll see. I'll turn this around and I'll kind of show you where the hands are a little bit on here. Maybe go this way a little bit. Oh, that helped maybe a little bit. A little bit of this darker in here. Okay. I don't know that you can see this very well. So this is the one hand coming out that's just kind of, I think this one's supposed to be considered Adam. And then this one with the pointing over here, that's kind of the finger, is supposed to be God over on this side, right? Pointing over here and breathing life into the creation of Adam over here. So I don't know if you can see very much of that texture. I'm getting like a lot of shadows and things, but the texture of that grout is probably more textured than plaster would be. But I think that there would be probably, even with plaster, a texture on there. So that one is for Fresco, trying to duplicate a process that I don't know that it would take a lot of practice. It would take a lot of practice with this particular technique, but after this dries, I'm going to be interested to see how it feels different, looks different than an acrylic painting. So that is a little bit about Fresco. And there is a process where you can mix, or you can work on wet plaster, and then there's a process where you can work on dry plaster. So you can imagine that, but it's still going to be wet media. It's going to be watercolors essentially that are absorbing into the plaster. But I would imagine that you would maybe be able to get more details. And there's a particular name. Did I write that down? Secco Fresco. Secco Fresco meaning dry. So that's the two different ways that you can kind of, and I'm sure that there are other kind of variations. But as far as the process of working like a wet on wet media, it's very similar to a process with watercolors where you can have the paper wet and use the wet watercolors, and you really don't have that much control. So I'm not surprised that I'm working on wet, plaster-ish, and working with wet pigments, and I'm not getting a lot of control. So I would imagine like as the plaster dries, Michelangelo was able to get more details, because the Sistine Chapel, the creation of Adam, and all of the images that are on there are very detailed. I mean, you're not able to see them up close, but they have to be at least detailed enough that you can recognize, what they are. So hopefully this is something that gets your mind thinking about that there are other processes. There are other processes and techniques than just painting acrylic on canvas or just using watercolor on watercolor paper. There are so many different techniques and even ways that you can use like chalk pastels and grind them up to make a pigment on there that has a little bit more grit and texture in there. So I hope this sparked some ideas for you and got you thinking about what you might do today that is creative and something different than you've done before. Definitely, if you need ideas, want ideas for creating kind of on a daily basis, I have my Art Journaling 101 group, and the month of August we are doing doodles. So that's been fun to kind of use the list and kind of go through those. I think I've done 3 or 4 so far, and I'm just using a small little journal. And all you need for that is a Sharpie. Like that's really all that you need to be able to doodle, really any kind of pen. I just like to use an ultrafine Sharpie. And that is where, if you need some ideas on a daily basis to be creative, I would encourage you to join over there and share and get ideas from other people and use the prompt list that I provide every month so that you can, go through and have those creative ideas. So I will see you back again next week. So Kathy says, wonder how a watercolor ground would work. You're not going to have the same texture. So something that stays wet and maybe has a little bit of texture, I would think even if you took like the ground up chalk and made like the background with that, that would be something that would stay wet and give you a little bit of, I want to say tooth or ground, to be able to work on. So I was trying to simulate the idea of a fresco as much as possible. So I will see you back again next week for the letter G. And remember, if you want to watch any of these videos on replay, they are available on my YouTube channel as a playlist. So you can go through all of those, usually about 30 or 35 minutes, and just some ideas to spark some interest, maybe have you learn something that you didn't know before, and to get you started creating and like keep you creating and giving you some ideas of how to do that. So I will see you back again next week for Art in the AM and the ABCs of Art at 10:30 a.m. Eastern.